I think today we're gonna talk about problems, and that's something that I've been getting my mind around more and more over, as I've gotten older, I guess. Is people ask me a lot what book I read, or what's the I went to Stanford executive program last summer, and what's the class or the professor or whatever that really just brought it home, and what if I really want to change my organization and drive revenue at exponential growth, like what's the book I should read? And I have them all here. I've got lots of books. I got Charles O'Reilly's Lead and Disrupt. That's a pretty good one, if you guys know Charles O'Reilly, but he was a professor that I had at Stanford. He's pretty good. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. That's a pretty good thick book with lots of small words. I mean, you really get your money's worth reading this bad boy. Salespeople, agile selling. We're all agile, right? We got to move quick. We got to be agile. So you can spend a lot of time reading this one. That's not going to be agile, because you're going to spend hours and hours reading a 350-page book about being quick. So we'll throw that one over there. The Challenger Sale. Woo! Let's challenge each other. Let's challenge everyone. This is the one there. Everybody likes the Challenger Sale. We've got to be challengers. It's all bullshit. All of those are bullshit. So, I mean, they're great books. I learn from them. Yeah, I take a little antidote from it. There's something I pull from it and go, that's interesting. What was the Predictable Revenue was one that I liked from Aaron Ross back in the day. I had been selling that way for years. So it was something I could use to train people with and just say, oh, here, read this book and you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. The reality is that over time, what I've come to the realization of is that all I do in my life is just solve problems. That's it. A challenger sale is good. Yeah, okay, let's be challengers, because sometimes the problem that you're solving, the customer doesn't understand the problem. They think they know how to solve the problem, but they don't really know how to solve it. So yes, challenging and pushing back on some of these things to help somebody get to the point where you can help them really come to the solution they need is important. And every one of those books, again, these are great professors and really smart people. But what I find is I've created a foundation, I guess, that ultimately every day, every conversation I'm having, and the conversation I'm having with you guys today, is I really just want to figure out what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and then like talk about it and figure out how we can solve it together. Because that's really what we do. We're all really just problem solvers. And so when I look at the definition of a problem, so a problem is a matter or situation regarded as unwelcome or harmful and needing to be dealt with and overcome. Every time I go work at a new company, just to give you guys my back, I worked at Yahoo from 98 to 06. So my background was kind of Yahoo was my founding kind of thing. And at Yahoo, I was asked to go in and help build multiple different businesses. So I was part of Yahoo Commerce in the beginning, and then Yahoo Shopping eventually, and then Yahoo Sports, and built several $100 million businesses across Yahoo. I then went to Kayak, the travel company, but it was SideStep is where I started, and then we got bought by Kayak, and that was a pretty big success story. Criteo is another one. You guys might know Criteo because you're Europeans. Criteo is a Parisian company out of Paris. Personalized retargeting was one of the big Paris kind of success stories. They went public, $4 billion, $5 billion company. I was their first VP in the US. They were nothing at the time, very small. I took them from zero to about 200 million in a year and a half in the US. And then you mentioned One Page, Nikki, and then iMerit. I've been at a lot of companies where what I do is I come in and scale them and figure out how do we solve the problem. And it took me a while to realize that's what I was doing. And when I meet with the CEO of a company, I basically go in and say, like, what's your problem? What are we trying to solve? What are we trying to do today? And generally what their CEO is trying to do, and I think there's some on this call today, is you're trying to get funding. And whether or not you realize that or not, that's kind of what you're trying to do. And to get funding, you need to have revenue and you need to have enough revenue and enough stability to get the valuation that you're trying to get. And how do you get that valuation? Well, you get that valuation through revenues, you get that validation through logos, and you get that validation through having a great team. So, you don't have to read the hard things about hard things to figure out that those are the things that you need to solve pretty fast. I mean, it's a great book. Again, Horowitz is awesome, but like ultimately you need logos with revenue and a team. And if you have these three things and that's working, then guess what? You're going to end up getting funding. The things are going to happen, but it's really as basic as that. And so when I go in and I talk to CEOs, I generally find out pretty quick. Normally it's like a round, $5 million, $10 million kind of companies raise some money. And so their VC firm or someone reached out to me. So like iMerit as an example, Pierre Omidyar, I don't know if you guys know Pierre, he was the founder of eBay. Omidyar is a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. They reached out to me and said, Millsy, some people call me Millsy, you need to meet this company. And I'm like, Indian outsource services. That's not what I do. Oh, you can help them. They need your help. Oh, you don't want to burn bridges, so you eventually have the meeting. But when you go in, you end up talking to them, and they basically are like, I've created the black box of the future. The black box is amazing, and inside is all the technology that's needed to do something really exciting and special. And then I come in and go, but can it really do that? And they're like, oh, we can. It's a special box and it's great. And then I kind of end up grabbing a Louisville Slugger, which is a baseball bat for those who don't know. And I bang it a couple times and find out, is this really a strong black box that can really hold up to the pressures and stuff that we're going to need to do? And if I join the company, it's because I'm kind of interested in the box that they've created and want to understand how it works. And that was Criteo for me. And honestly, that box was really good. Their technology was world-class. So all I'm doing at that point is going out, and Criteo is a good one because a French company, they had like 75 slides in their PowerPoint around how personalized retargeting works, all the special things about retargeting, pixels and cookies being dropped and the tracking and how the ads are created and all these things. And then I walked into a agency and put the slides on the board. And as you can tell, I'm not using slides today because I don't really believe in slides, but there's 75 slides on the screen. I have it in like panoramic view or whatever, so they can see like, oh shit, Millsy's brought in 75 slides today. And then I have like Coronas and Tostito Castle ready to feed the people when we're done with the presentation. So then I walk to the whiteboard and I write 100 on the whiteboard and I say, if I drive 100 people to your website, what percentage are going to convert? And they go, 3%. I go, okay, 3%. So that's 3 orders. What's your average order size? And they go, well, that about $150. So I go, okay, cool. So that's $450. And then what's your margin? And they're like, oh, $20. And I go, okay, well, quick math. All right. So you'd make $90 off of 100 people that I sent to you. So you could pay about 90 cents per click that I sent to you and you would be successful. And they're like, yeah, probably. Yeah, probably work. And I'm like, well, my technology that I have here is so much better than what you realize. So I'm going to start at 45 cents. How about that? Half. Let's close a deal today, 20K based on 45 cents a click. If you think it's going well, you can bid up and increase it. If you think it's not going well, just pull it. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. I'm like, cool, Coronas, pop, chips, woo. Like I solved their problem. Ultimately, I can bring them traffic for a lower cost than they're currently getting it, and it will convert at a margin that is profitable for them. And if that works on a 20K test, and that solves their problem, guess what they're going to do? They're going to spend 10 times more revenue with me. And that's how I created a $200 million company in less than a year. I didn't use 75 slides. I used a black pen, a whiteboard, and I just did the math real quick for them. And they were like, done. Now I get really bored at a company like Criteo after about 6 months because I have that conversation with like 100 companies. I've closed probably 95 of that 100 or whatnot. And then at that point, it's like someone else can take the pen and now and just write it on the whiteboard. I mean, like this isn't that hard. Like this isn't that complicated. So, you know, then the thing scales and hire someone cheaper than me and do well. And I'll take my little stock options and go do the next one. And sorry, I'm kind of jumping around. So the reality though, is that was what the CEO's issue was when I came into Criteo. They were coming from Europe, they were moving into the US, and they didn't know how to break into the market. And they were trying to break into the market with 75 slide decks to agencies who, that's just not what's going to speak to them, right? And so, so I solved their problem. And I worked directly for John Baptiste Rudel, and and that was his problem. Now, the reality is every CEO I talk to, basically that is the same problem. Funding, valuation, revenue, logos, great teams. So if I can solve that problem for the CEO, what happens is I become the number 2 person in the company pretty fast, or, you know, I become somebody who's really important in the company because I'm just solving their problem. And then they want to hug you and push you closer and closer to their desk because you're the one who's making that happen. You don't, I mean, these books are great. Again, all these books are awesome. All you really need to know is, can you solve their problem and how do you solve their problem, and be thinking all day about how to do that. Biggest way you're going to solve their problem ultimately is closing those deals. So I'm going to kind of move over into the sales side a bit and maybe tell a couple stories there. So I just told you the Criteo story, which I thought was, makes the point pretty good. I think one of the things about the Criteo story, though, is that we solved the problem. If it doesn't work, you can't win. So the challenger sale, as an example, this book, challenging people, like all that's great to get the deal closed. But when I came in and I drew the 100 on the whiteboard and went through and showed them to do this deal, if it didn't deliver and they didn't make money on it, would they have renewed? No, the deal would be over, right? So I mean, I'd get 20K, like, woohoo, I crushed it. But like the deal would never get bigger than 20K. Now, let's say I really crushed it and I got them to sign up for $1 million that first day and it didn't deliver. Is that good for the company or bad? Like, it's good for the company because they got the logo, they got the revenue, they got all that stuff, but it's really false advertising, right? Like the reality is that's not a real $1 million. Like that's a con man's $1 million. You didn't actually solve their problem. And so because of that, they're not going to renew. There's not going to be further on deals. So whoever's investing into that company right now is actually investing into basically like a bucket that has a hole on the bottom. Like it looks good because it's filled up, but it's dripping out the bottom. It's going to drain pretty fast. And so what I'm trying to figure out in the very beginning is, can this work? Are customers happy? So the things I'm looking for in the very beginning is net retention rate. Like once I sign somebody up and we bring them in, are we closing the deal? Are they renewing on it right away? Yes, every SaaS company looks at some of those types of stats as far as attrition and stuff, but this is even more. This is even bigger. It's like less even about attrition. It's about like how important are you to the problem they're solving. NPS scores would be something that kind of gives you a decent balance of understanding like how clients really look at you. I'm 100% white glove service. So all these automated things, you can come in, click a button and get it. And they pitch how great it is and seamless it is to investors. That's good. But the reality is you're not getting the intel you needed. I would say today, the most sexy, important job in the business is like AI engineers, AI scientists. A decade ago, it was probably like just straight up software engineers. But the reality is they're not, because they're not building what the client needs. They're building what they want to build. They're building what they're interested in. But then once I go out into the market with that black box, I find out what does the customer really want. So one of the analogies I talk to my team about is cars salespeople, the slimiest salespeople in the business, right? If a gentleman came into a car lot and he was instructed to go buy a minivan today because he's got 3 kids and the wife said, go in and buy the minivan, that's what we need. And he goes in to buy the minivan. And he gets to the car lot and the sales rep says, oh, A minivan? You're a true man. You shouldn't be driving a minivan. You should be driving a Corvette. You deserve it. You make the money in the family. You need the Corvette. You need the V8 and the horsepower and blah, blah, blah. And he goes and he sells this man his red splashy two-seater Corvette, and ooh, off into the sunset the guy drives. Is that sales rep good? I mean, he convinced someone to buy a more expensive car. He got them to buy the Corvette that he wanted to move off of the lot. But he actually didn't solve that guy's problem. When that guy leaves, he's going to go home. He's going to get in trouble, and probably divorced. And that guy's never going to end up buying another car from that dealership again or whatever. You know, like you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Now, if instead you had gone in and talked to him and said, ooh, I see your struggle today, sir. The minivan's kind of tough. I understand. You want something with power, and you know, and you went and took him and showed him an SUV where he gets the V8 and it's got some power and he feels like, ooh, it's a truck chassis, and ooh, this feels a little bit better to me, but it fits all the kids and it fits the sports equipment and it does all the things that the minivan would have done. Now you probably have a customer for life because you actually solved his problem in a way that would scale for him, that he brought it home. Wife might be like, that's not the minivan I asked you to. And he's like, yeah, but I feel so much better driving this. I'm happy to drive this. And it does all the things that you wanted in the minivan. That's the way people have to be thinking about their business when it comes to anything, SaaS sales, services. It doesn't really matter. And you have to get the feedback from the market when you're talking to them. And so that's what I'm look at as what I think the sexiest, most important job today in the world is those who are going out in the beginning of a company and testing that black box and making sure that that black box is what the customer actually needs. You have a hypothesis, you have a feeling, you know, that you can solve something that's investable. You start to create it, but once you get into it, you have to be able to hear what the customer is saying, what their true needs are, and then be able to deliver towards that true need. If you don't do that, then everything else is kind of a joke. It's not scalable. It's not real. It might pass the test for a fundraise because you've got the math on a spreadsheet or whatever, but it's not going to stand the test as you start to get deeper. So what happens when you start to scale the company, you get to 10 million, maybe 20 million. And if it's not built, if that structure wasn't built right from the beginning, the nuts and bolts in the cabin start to pop and the water starts going, and things start to shoot through, and you realize we're going to get stuck here. And that's why so many companies get stuck at around 10 million in revenue, is because the technology that was being built wasn't really strong enough to scale, and the market that they were going after wasn't solving the problem at the level that needed to be solved. And so again, to me, solving that problem for the customer, if I do that right, then I've gotten pretty close to what the CEO is looking for, because I promise you the logos and the revenue and all that stuff's going to come with it. Now, the third piece is, and maybe the part that I'm most excited to talk about, is the team part. And so every company that you work at, it's about the team. I get in trouble a lot with CEOs where they say, Jeff, you know, you're a people manager, not a company manager. You do what's best for the people, not what's best for the company. And then my response always is, but the people are the company. So that's not playing out for me. If what I'm doing is best for the people, but not for the company, then that's the wrong company. I shouldn't be working at this company. I mean, this fundamentally, something's broken, because you're only as good as the people who are going to take you there. And so my interview style has changed drastically over the last 20 years. You know, I have books. I have more of these books on my shelf that talk about interviewing and the right questions to ask. And, you know, how many marbles can you fit into a overhead compartment on your airline flight? You know, that's going to help you understand how good the person's going to be. What's another one? Are you a land animal or an air animal? What kind of tree would you be if you had to name a tree to be? Like, I don't ask any of these silly questions. I don't even ask, like, name a time in your career that you did whatever it is that I'm looking for. Most people, when they're going to interview, are thinking about themselves, and they're thinking about, can you solve my problem? And that's basically what you're interviewing for. Can you solve what I need? My interview technique is flip the other way. I get on the call and say, hey, you're in front of me today because someone thinks that you're good and you could potentially fill a gap in our company. What I want to know today is what your problem is and how can I help you solve it? What do you want to do? Who do you want to be? Why are you looking for a job right now? What's not happening at your current company that's not making you jump out of bed in the morning and like land on both feet and clap your hands twice and go seize the day? Like what is it that's holding you back in your career? And what's holding you back in your life? And how can I help you with it? And if I can help you with it, like I can with any CEO I talk about or anyone I network with or anybody that, any client I've ever met, and I don't have that role myself, that's all right. I know a lot of people. I'm super connected. I don't mean that arrogantly, but I probably know somebody who has a role that's very similar to whatever it is that you're looking for right now. Whether it's a role I have or not, I probably know someone who does. So once you're in my network, what I'm trying to figure out is, how can I help you solve your problem just like I would a CEO or my customer? And so I want the conversation to be very much around what they're looking for, what they need, what's going to really motivate them. And if those things cross with what I happen to be looking for and with the job that I happen to have open, what do you think the odds of success are? It's like through the roof. It's like 99.9%. I mean, it's super, super high because most people aren't idiots. Most aren't. I mean, most people are pretty smart. Most people, by the time they're looking for some of these jobs and going through these things, are capable people. So the question is just really what you're doing. Does that line up with what they're looking to do? And if those two things line up, the odds of success are pretty high. At least by the time they get to me. I mean, hopefully we've weeded out like people who I shouldn't have been talking to, but once it comes to someone I'm talking to at that point, like the odds of them being like good people and whatnot, like it's pretty high. And so if I can connect those two things together, then the odds of success are significant. And what happens when I have that conversation, and I hear it literally every day because I'm interviewing people every day, is, no one's ever had this conversation with me in my career. This is the first time anyone's ever asked me what I want, what motivates me, and it's sad. It's crazy, isn't it? Like, people get in these interviews and they just come in and fire, like, tell me 3 success stories you've had in your life. And like within 10 seconds, they're like, you're out, or like, what is going on? Like, talk to the person, find out who they are. My retention rate of the people who work for me is super, super high. At our company now, when I started, there was less than 300 people working here. We're now over 5,000. Our retention rate as a company is over 95% of 5,000 people. Now, some of that's because we're a social impact company and we're creating jobs for underprivileged youth and underprivileged and underserved backgrounds, and we're an inclusive workforce. So, we're 55% female as a company. We are really big on learning and development and training and, all these things. And so people feel like they have a sense of purpose working here. And that's the reality, is that in today's workforce, you need to have a sense of purpose. If you aren't connected to what you're doing, there's no reason to do it. And the new, rise of the millennials and, these people who are coming up, they're wired differently. Like they're like, if I'm not doing good, I don't want to do it anyways. And so this idea that it's all about the money is kind of over, but let's not kid ourselves, the money still matters. And there's so much money in the economy right now. There's so much money in the funding that people can get jobs and get paid a lot of money anywhere they go. In fact, like right now, most of the people who I manage out when that just didn't end up connecting, you know, our company is really hard. Like your IQ has to be significant. This IQ plus EQ has to like really come together to do well in the sales side of this company. It's very consultative, getting deep into technology. So some people who come from like a SaaS sales background would be really good at selling this like playbook. When they come to really big breadth of things you can do with massive depth, that becomes a little bit more difficult for them to get their minds around. And so sometimes you can get a little bit misalignment, even though culturally it was a great alignment. There is some like just skill set deficiencies that you can't overcome with that. But when I help them get their next job, which by the way, I do, because what do? I solve their problem. What their problem is when they're working here is they don't have the right job. It's not that they're not good people. They just don't have the right job for them. I hired them, so it's my fault that they don't have the right job. It's not their fault. It's my fault. I hired them for the job. I hired them for a job that they weren't great at. That's on me. That's not on them. So then how do I help them with all the knowledge that I have get the right job? And so I have somebody today, the last day is tomorrow, and I got her a 50% raise at the next company she's working at. You know, so, you know, I want to get into discussion and not just be soapboxing this whole time. So, you know, the point to me, the point that I'm trying to make here is that if you reset your compass to the foundation being, I'm trying to solve the problem that's in front of me today. And maybe that problem is just listening. That's what my wife tells me. Sometimes it's just listening. It's not actually solving the problem. It's just listening to what her problem is. Then do it. Because if you really start managing your life and your relationships around how am I helping the person that's in front of me right now, the rest of it starts to come together really quick.